Right now, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky's high-stakes meeting with President Trump set to happen at any minute.
I'm meeting with President Zelensky, and I'll be telling him about the call. I mean, we have a problem. They don't get along too well, those two.
Then ICE operations heating up.
No longer a protest. This is an unlawful assembly.
Protesters clash with authorities yet again at the ICE facility outside Chicago. And in Portland, NewsNation goes on a ride-along with ICE as they look for, quote, the worst of the worst. Then New York City politics heats up in a critical mayoral debate between the three standing candidates.
This is not a job for a first-timer.
I'm standing here with my two adversaries, both of whom have threatened to defund the police.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Nick Smith, in today for Nichole Berlie. We begin today at the White House as we wait for another high-stakes meeting between President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. After securing that deal in Gaza, Mr. Trump is turning his attention back to the war in Ukraine, where he's pushing for a ceasefire. But this meeting comes as Zelensky has another goal, those deadly long-range Tomahawk missiles. The Ukrainian president says his military wants the high-powered missiles to take down Russian military targets. The two leaders will be together today as we also learn about a planned meeting between Mr. Trump and Russian President Putin in Budapest. Correspondent Kelly Myers live at the White House with the very latest to break it all down for us. Kelly, good afternoon.
Hey there, Nick. So President Zelensky is expected to arrive in the next hour or so. President Trump is hosting the Ukrainian leader for the third time here at the White House, the fifth time this year. The two leaders are expected to discuss finally ending the war in Ukraine. As you mentioned there, Nick, the president is feeling sort of this spring in his step to end another war, saying this will be hopefully the 9th war he says he could end. It comes after, as you mentioned, the president spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin just yesterday for 2 hours on the phone, the president calling that call, quote, productive. And the meeting in Alaska, he says, really set the stage for more discussions. But President Trump has a very big decision to make here today. If he is going to arm Ukraine with those long-range Tomahawk missiles that you mentioned, Nick, the president said those missiles came up in the conversation with Putin, but no final decisions have been made.
You know, we need Tomahawks for the United States of America, too. We have a lot of them, but we need them. I mean, we can't deplete for our country. I did actually say, would you mind if I gave a couple of thousand Tomahawks to your opposition? I did say that to him. I said it just that way. He didn't like the idea. He really didn't like the idea. No, I said it that way. You have to be a little bit lighthearted sometimes, but no, he doesn't want Tomahawk is a vicious weapon. It's a vicious, offensive, incredibly destructive weapon.
And Zelensky is already here in Washington, Nick. He's holding meetings with American energy and defense companies. He is saying he will push for those long-range Tomahawk missiles to strengthen Ukraine's arsenal. He wrote this on X this morning saying, quote, we discussed our prospects for cooperation and ways to strengthen Ukraine's protection against Russian aggression. I outlined Ukraine's specific needs for air defense systems and their compatible missiles, as well as F-16 aircraft. Now, President Trump has voiced frustration with Russia's ongoing strikes in Ukraine. Just this week, the Ukrainian military said Russia conducted one of its largest attacks of the whole year, firing over 36 missiles and sending over 300 drones, targeting multiple areas around the country, leading to destruction and injuries. Nick.
Kelly, quick question for you. You said that this is the fifth meeting between the two leaders since Mr. Trump returned to the White House in January. So, Kelly, what happens now?
And that's the big question, Nick, because, you know, we were out there in Alaska and we really thought there was this momentum after that meeting, and then it kind of died down. But as we said, we're seeing the president really using what happened in the Middle East just earlier this week and now capping off and ending the week here with possibly working to end the Ukrainian war and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He seems to have a little bit of a more of a pep in his step to try to bring this to an end. We know he has plans to meet directly with Putin in Hungary in about 2 weeks from now. He also hosted, that would be hosted by Hungarian President and Trump ally Viktor Orban. He wrote shortly after the announcement that preparations for the USA-Russia Peace Summit are underway. Hungary is the island of peace. The goal is to get a trilateral meeting set up later in the future. And then here is the president from yesterday on that.
I mean, we have a problem. They don't get along too well, those two. And it's sometimes tough to have meetings, so we may do something where we're separate but equal. We'll meet and talk parties, but this is a terrible relationship the two of them have, and it's one of those things.
And that's what the president says has been an obstacle to getting this war done, is just the hatred between Putin and Zelensky, he says. Now, next week, Secretary of State Marco Rubio will be part of high-level meetings between Russia and the United States. Vice President Vance and Milley's envoy Steve Witkoff will be part of those initial discussions. Nick?
Kelly Meyer live at the White House. Kelly, thank you so much. So much to break down there. Joining me now is the Director of Communications for the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America, Andrei Dobryansky. Andrei, good afternoon. Andrei, let's listen to this sound, and then I want to chat with you on the other side.
I did actually say, would you mind if I gave a couple of thousand tomahawks to your opposition? I did say that to him. I said it just that way. He didn't like the idea. He really didn't like the idea. Tomahawk is a vicious weapon. It's a vicious, offensive, incredibly destructive weapon.
A vicious, incredibly destructive weapon. Andrei, good afternoon again. You know, President Zelensky has made it clear that he would like to have these weapons. He actually put out a statement saying we expect the momentum of curbing terror and war that succeeded in the Middle East will help to end Russia's war against Ukraine. Andrei, how important are these weapons to Ukrainian President Zelensky?
When you're talking about tomahawks, this is something that actually President Trump has been mentioning himself. So up until yesterday and that conversation with Putin and that remark to the press, all that President Trump has been leaning towards is the release of authorization for Ukraine to get them eventually. Now, in that graphic, it says fired from ships. That's the key point here, that there are new mobile land-based launchers for these systems that Ukrainians would have to be trained on. This is not a system that Ukraine would be using right away, but it would be an effective way for President Trump to pressure his European allies to start releasing the kind of 500-mile systems that they have so far been reluctant. So this is very similar, where the United States had to take a lead and promising to eventually send Abrams tanks, which they did, but that allowed countries like England to send their Challenger tanks, that allowed Germany to send their tanks. So this is not just an important piece of munition because it can target the facilities that are making the drones, the ones you report on every night, that they target Ukraine with 500, 600 drones. They're made in a facility over 800 miles away from Ukraine that is staffed by North Korean manufacturers and soldiers. That's the facility we want to hit in Russia, so that we don't have to spend all this money on defensive weapons to protect Ukraine from that.
Andrei, we're keeping an eye on the possible arrival pretty soon of President Zelensky. We have a split screen with you and the White House there. So should he appear in the next hour or so, we will be ready to take that live. I do want to go back to that map, though, Andrei, because you talked about the range of these missiles, and I want to talk about why that's important. Because the Tomahawk, the range from Ukraine, it looks as though not only would it be able to hit Moscow, but it would actually be able to get into areas that are key points of military installations and key holding sites for the Russian military.
Well, the United States and Ukraine are in agreement on this, and specifically they talked about this, President Trump, President Zelensky, at the UN on September 27th, where they came to an agreement that they're doing the right thing. I want to point out to the American audience that this strategy of hitting Russian fuel production, whether it's natural gas or crude oil, this is what Ukraine has been doing with the partnership of the United States. It started with one facility in June, and it ramped up to, by September, we hit 31 fuel facilities in Russia. That's a decrease of 17 to 20% of their output. This is what President Trump Russia and oil out of the rest of the world to put pressure on Russia. But in the meantime, he is ready to incredible level of liquefied natural gas and American oil. So it's a win-win, this strategy that they came up together. When you're talking about these missiles, they can hit the airports and areas of Moscow with their drones. Ukraine has demonstrated that. What we need is to change the battlefield. So we're not just talking about the different fuel depots that are within range of the drones now of Ukraine's border, but we want to be able to hit deeper. And that means that Russia now needs to move their air defense systems, not just from Ukraine's border, but deeper into Russia.
Andre, what about the reporting that Kelly just said from the White House of Viktor Orban possibly trying to arrange a trilateral meeting? How likely is that between Mr. Trump, Mr. Trump, President Zelensky, and of course Vladimir Putin?
Well, for Hungary, first and foremost, that's one of the countries that Trump has been upset about because he can't convince them to stop buying Russian oil. So there's plenty of Mr. Trump and Mr. Orban to talk about making sure that they follow the rules that Mr. Trump puts down on the table. But as far as actually hosting something, this is very similar to what Putin suggested back in May. When Europe was ready to put harsher sanctions on, he said, no, don't worry, I'm going to fly to Istanbul and meet with Trump and Zelensky in Istanbul. That never happened. But what did happen is that Europe delayed its sanctions. Much like this, the Alaska summit happened, and President Trump got very angry at that. There's new reporting out just yesterday about how President Putin drove President Trump crazy, talking about history, talking about other things, and President Trump just wants to get to a deal. So I think the strategy that Trump and Zelensky put together about putting the pressure on oil facilities, and also I'll remind everybody that the Senate leader John Thune said that sanctions are still available on Russian oil tankers. This maximum pressure is what Trump wants to do because it's exactly what Putin has been doing. Every time that Putin and Trump have talked, he has launched missiles on Ukraine the same day. I think Trump wants to reverse that.
Andre Dobriansky with the very latest for us. Andre, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right now, we're following breaking developments in the indictment of President Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton. Mr. Bolton has just left the courthouse after pleading not guilty to all 18 counts of the indictment in a federal courtroom. The former ally and aide to Mr. Trump turned critic is accused of mishandling classified information using his personal email and messaging app. We have a team who is inside that Maryland courthouse this morning, and they will join us live coming up. Up next, the U.S. is taking out boats in the Caribbean, saying that they carry drugs bound for the United States. But questions are mounting into the legality of such moves, and now news that members of one Venezuelan boat survived an attack.
And what I tell the president is if he ever wants to come for New Yorkers in the way that he has been, he's going to have to get through me as the next mayor of the city.
Sparks fly in New York City's mayoral debate. We break down the best moments from each of the candidates ahead.